Hi Alexis, this is going to be a really quick pleating video. Um, as I've said in my messages with you, I'm pretty new to sewing. Um, so I've been sewing for about 6 months, and for 5 of them I've been using a machine. So I'm getting there, but still completely new to most of this stuff. And pleating initially was so incredibly hard, and I have to say that it is still one of the things that I struggle with. So now that we have the school uniforms available, I'm going to see how I go with them. Even though it's not the style for my doll, I know that if I want to sell them and they're relatively decent quality, somebody might be interested in them. Anyway, for this, obviously you'll need your fabric offcut. I'm just using, well, you don't need an offcut, you just your fabric. This is just an offcut that I am using just because I found it and it was already sort of decent enough for an MSD skirt. Sorry, I'll just adjust this yet again. Okay, so here's my fabric. Now the other things you'll need are pins. Some people don't use pins, but I find them not necessarily important when you're first doing the pleats, because it does depend on the fabric you're using and how thick it is. This is actually very thin, but your best friend during pleating is going to be just my tripod. I might need to buy a new one. Your best friend during pleating is going to be your iron. So I make sure I try and iron out any sort of ones that, any folds or creases that might have been there before it's not working fantastically. And I dare say that if I had a proper ironing board, it'd be better. It's on my to get list. Okay, now the thing that I do, I actually flip the fabric so that I'm pulling the pleats towards me. I don't know why I do this, I just found it easier. So what you're going to do is, initially your first pleat, leave a little bit of an extra amount. See, if I pick that up, it's quite a large amount, and I do that so that I can add my closure, which I generally tend to use Velcro because it's good for dolls' clothes. But even if I was going to put a zip in there, I would still need that extra little bit of fabric. So at the end of my skirt, I would be more likely to finish mid-pleat or however, and other people might not do that, but I do, because this would be the main part of the skirt that folds over to hide the closure. Okay, so the first thing I do is find where I want to start my first pleat, and then I pinch. Okay, so I've pinched my fabric, so it's actually folding. So it's pinched, and then I just bring it towards me just a little bit. So if I push down on this pleat, I can feel that it has 2 ridges to it, because the fabric goes like this in like an S shape as it's pleated. So after I've done my first pleat, I then iron it. That will help the pleat stay in shape and folded. Now when you do your pleat, don't pick it up from where the pleat is. Your next pleat actually needs to come across. You pinch it, and it depends on how big you want your pleats. These ones are probably just over 1 centimeter big. So you start here, this is where your current pleat is. Come down to where how big you want your next pleat. So about 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeters for me at the moment. And I pinch again. Okay, and then I pull it towards me again to create the second pleat. Okay, now every single pleat needs to be ironed in. So when you're ironing, just cover the pleats that you've done before. See how I'm not opening up the pleat? I'm leaving it there because I want the fabric to retain though the shape of those pleats for as long as possible. So for my third pleat, I just do the same thing again. I can put my fingernail on the pleat that I've just done and then come down approximately the same width as the pleats that I've already done. I pinch again. So you can see I've got 2 pleats and I've pinched again. So I'm making my third pleat now, and I pinch and pull, and there's my third pleat. So in each of these pleats you'll basically be able to feel the fabric underneath, because every single pleat has the same shape. Okay, so when you're looking at it, your pleat, if you unravel it, you'll see that it has 2 distinct lines, one that folds out and this other one that folds in. So the most important part to get your pleat, I think, other than ironing, is that you need to remember that once you've got your pleat down, this might not be the best fabric, I'm hoping though. Once you've got your pleat down, you don't pick up that pleat again. You actually move your finger down to the same amount, pinch and pull. Now if a pleat gets left behind, don't worry, you can push it down just like that. Push them all down so they're all flat and iron. I don't mind. It's actually better to go over your previous pleats. You're reinforcing that that's where you want them to fold. And as you can see, we are making this. I've got 4 pleats here. 4 pleats. Now this skirt's a bit long. Now, before you sew in your waistband, because pleats, if I just pick this up, you can see the pleats actually come undone. That's super annoying, and it can happen mid-sew in a machine. So what I do is, with my pleats, I come back, and depending on the fabric, I pin as I go. But this is super thin fabric that I bought just for practice purposes. And I haven't needed to pin as I went. But for thicker, better quality fabric, definitely pin as you go. So you need to pin the pleat in place. So I actually take my pin. I'll use what's a good colour? What about red? Just so you can see where I put it. So I actually stick my pin in mid pleat and then go to the next pleat. I'll try and use red and I'll show you what I mean. So this is a relatively long pleated skirt. So I try and put my pins as close to the bottom as possible, because that's not where I'm going to be sewing. So stick it in the middle of a pleat and go through the next pleat. Now I probably use a ton more pins than someone who is a good sewer, but this is just my way of doing it because I'm new and I'm just figuring out how to do things. So I want you to take a look at these pleats now. If I try and hold that up now, you can see that the top of the skirt is not pinned, but the bottom is. So the pleats are being saved there, and when I lie it back down, it just goes pretty much straight back into its correct form. So I'll show you here. So when I'm pinning my pleats, I stick one end in, I go in through the middle of one pleat and out through the middle of one pleat. Then I come to the next one. So in the middle of one pleat, out the middle of the next one. So I might end up with, 15 pins up and down here, but my pleats are going to stay in place as much as possible when I'm sewing. Now when I sew, I always sew with the pleat. So if I sew this way, you can see that I'm going to be catching the pleats potentially with my sewing machine. But if I So with the pleats, I'm not going to be catching anything because they're just going to go the same way that the pleats do. I don't know if I've explained this properly. I hope I haven't. I've realised I haven't used the best material for it, but I hope that my verbal instructions are good enough. I would definitely say practice pleating before you actually sew anything. Remember, once you've done the pleating, you can check it. If you want to see how it fans out, just do what I've done with the pins, because if you hold it up, you can see the way your skirt will fan a little bit. So yeah, that's how I do my pleating. I hope it's clear enough. Like I said, I'm new to all this, and I've taken the tips from DG Requiem on Etsy, and then I probably have added a few of my own little bits and pieces here and there, but this currently works for me, and I'm actually working on pleated skirts later today, so maybe I will be able to come back and show you that, but I'll upload this now, so hopefully it will help. Thank you for watching my videos, and yeah, I really appreciate that you took the time out to comment on them as well. Thank you. Bye.